came up. Um, this group, Panhandle Health, on May 10th, just a few months from now, will be hosting a strategic planning meeting. An honored guest of that meeting, by the way, will be the commissioners, because frankly, we take our marching orders from the commissioners. And so they'll be present, and they will give us direction as to where they want to see the health district go moving into the future. So this is kind of one of these introspective moments where you sort of say, well, where are we going? That's May 10th. And so Seth Grigg is going to facilitate that event. And so he's going to coordinate that with his IAC in-service that he does for elected officials. Did I answer your question? Okay. 9 to 3. It's a Saturday. Saturday, May 10th, 9 to 3. You'll have the board members here. You may have other elected personalities, state assembly, but we're hoping that we get as many of the elected commissioners as possible. I guess I need a motion to accept item 6. Do we hear a second? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any objections? Nay? Okay. Consent agenda is passed. Eric, can we hear from the director's report?
Yes, I just have one brief item to discuss as to staff in County. I don't see the position for health, so we do not have a trustee for this. So I just wanted to bring up that we will in upcoming meetings be selecting trustees the rest of the
Okay, and so we hope she's seated next month.
My understanding is that Stone County has selected Commissioner Powell to represent Stone County on this board, but as you know, we do have to go through the election process with 15 county commissioners. So I'm hoping that will be on the process.
So we don't have control as to whether she'll actually be a seated board or not, because there are unknowns.
Correct.
All right. So it would be premature to make that an action item for the next board meeting, technically speaking. So why don't we wait until she's actually seated, and then we'll make it an action item, and then anticipate the following month that we would vote on the trustee. Is everyone happy with that? Are they board members? Sure, go ahead.
Currently, the legislation may be legislative holding with us. I'm sorry. And we may want to appoint an interim trustee to participate in those trustee meetings where they discuss these kind of issues, and you would want to be represented.
And I hear you loud and clear. As chairman, I'm actually an ex officio member of that data committee automatically. I have been attending those meetings. And the last meeting we had of whatever updates there were with the state legislature, the meeting lasted a sum total of 30 seconds. There was not a lot of activity. So I promise you, if something of merit comes up, I'll send you an email. How does that sound? Is that okay? And by the way, I will invite all board members. If you want to participate in those meetings, you're welcome. Glenn, please, you've been doing it for years. We'll make sure you get on it. I think it's fine. More the merrier. It's just, for whatever reason, there are some topics that have come up as it relates to the health districts, but they're being packaged within a much bigger bill having to do with Medicaid with the Medicaid program. And I don't know, there are a lot of moving parts there. And it's the politics of that are not certain, but it, it would affect the health districts only in a peripheral manner. Right, and Kelly attends all of those meetings. They get the word back. And Eric is plugged in with the directors, and they're caucusing with one another all the time. I don't think no legislation of any merit would fall below our radar screen. I'm not worried about that. But again, Glenn, you're welcome. As a matter of fact, come join Eric and I next Tuesday afternoon at 2:30, and you can sit in on our Zoom call. You're welcome to join us. And it may, but I warn you, it may only last 30 seconds. All right. So now we're going to go to the public comment section. Okay, here we are. Like I indicated before, out of deference and respect for the other board members, we're going to have public comment for 20 minutes, 3 minutes per speaker, at which point we're going to shut it down. The board will discuss, deliberate, vote. Please stay around because afterwards I'll be here until the end of the day. I'll pull out a cot. We can hang out for a long time. I guess I will go down the list here, or sure. Abigail Leisen.
All right. Good afternoon, and thank you for holding this meeting. My name is Abigail Lees, and I'm a local homeschool mom and a vaccine injury awareness advocate since 2019. My story begins in 2011 when I was very sick all summer and in and out of doctor's offices and on multiple rounds of antibiotics. It was September of that year when I got engaged, and my doctor told me, "Oh, you're getting married. You need to get the Gardasil vaccine to protect yourself." He never explained a single potential risk from this shot beyond the CDC pamphlet, and never mentioned that you should not get vaccines while sick unless you want to increase your risk of vaccine injury. I went home that evening feeling awful and ended up asking my fiance to stay with me because I was sure I was going to die that night. Fast forward a few months and I discovered a severe gluten sensitivity, which is likely an autoimmune disorder called celiac disease. With that context, I'd like to read from the Gardasil package, the insert, some information that would have led me down a very different path and would have changed my life. This is straight from the FDA website, but no doctor has ever sent me to look it up for myself or any shot that I've given to my children. And for the sake of time, I'll only read a handful of them. It says the following adverse experiences have been spontaneously reported during post-approval use of Gardasil. Autoimmune hemolytic anemia, idiopathic thrombocytopenic purpura, pulmonary embolus, nausea, pancreatitis and vomiting, death, fatigue, malaise, autoimmune diseases, hypersensitivity reactions including anaphylaxis, dizziness, Guillain-Barré syndrome, headache, seizures. And on top of that, every single vaccine insert has line 13.1 that specifically states that the vaccine has not been evaluated for potential to cause carcinogenicity, genotoxicity, or impairment of male fertility. And all of the other vaccines just specifically say fertility for anyone. And I've printed the pages off if you guys want to see a physical copy, but again, they're all on the FDA page, and I would love for parents to have that consent.
Thank you. Matthew Loam.
All right. Hi, everybody. Thanks again for the meeting. Yesterday was the first international panel on geoengineering and weather modification. That was yesterday, February 19th. If you haven't seen it, look it up. It's pretty fantastic. As we speak, there's new initiatives called Save Our Skies. It's sponsored by Trump and Kennedy. And what we are discovering is that the geoengineering and cloud seeding issues are coming way above the surface, right? I have mentioned before that we see trails in the sky all the time. and I'm very, very concerned about them. Recently, Senator Tammy Nichols spoke. She introduced two bills. One was S-1064 and the other was 1065. One was about cloud seeding. The other one was about weather modification. Some people believe that cloud seeding is acceptable, but weather modification is unacceptable. I personally disagree, but the thing is they are talking about geoengineering, which are these trails left in the sky. Both of those bills were very concerned about toxic chemicals in our environment, rain and snow coming down with double the MCL, which is the max containment allowance of aluminum. So this board has mentioned in their mission statement that we exist to promote healthy lifestyles and help prevent disease while protecting the local environment that supports us all. I am merely asking you guys to live up to that. We have spoken a little bit about perhaps issuing a letter about a formal opinion of this board about what they believe is happening to our skies. There is a Facebook group that you could visit that has some interesting information. It's called Ban Geoengineering and Weather Modification in Idaho. There is a tab listed File. Under this topic of file is only empirical data. There is no discussion about look at the skies today or anything like that. There's only data about air, water, and snow tests, beekeepers' reports. A lot of these were taken by Anatech Labs, which is a very, very reputable laboratory company. Probably over 60% of this work has been done by them. I encourage you guys to go and check this out. What is my action item? All I believe that should be done by this board is a letter being issued. You guys you have 5 districts in your jurisdictions. There's tons of mayors in this jurisdiction. If I would not ask you to do anything that I wouldn't do myself, I took the liberty of drafting a letter as if I were the board of director, the sitting in Thomas's position, about what I would say. I took the language out of the bills that were passed in Tennessee, describing all I would ask anyone to say is, until there is a robust public debate about what may be going on in our skies, everything should be stopped until there is an open and formal discussion. I believe that we are, 20 seconds, I believe that we are going to get a ban on geoengineering with or without this board. Although I would like to do it with this board. I think that you could drive another nail into the coffin by issuing a formal letter to all these districts that you guys represent and look up to you and say, we think something strange is happening in our skies and we intend to do something about it. I'll hand you the sample letter, Thomas. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Wilder. Jeffrey Bent.
Thank you, Dr. Fletcher and the board, and I want to thank Commissioner Korn for being here today. I wanted to voice my support for the informed consent to be provided with vaccines. And I was very shocked to learn that we have 74 doses on the childhood schedule, and they have not been tested. This was a statement made by Secretary Robert Kennedy Jr., and I watched it myself this morning, and I'll read what he said verbatim. Not one of the 72 vaccines mandated for children has ever been safety tested in pre-licensing placebo-controlled trials. So what that tells me as a layperson is they don't know really what the long-term effects are, and they're just happy to keep pushing this. And this is a tragedy. It's a terrible catastrophe that we have allowed this to go on. And what when I learned of the possibility that the Panhandle Health District might provide informed consent, might provide the full disclosure, I really felt that was the way to go. I would have liked to have seen the COVID shots pulled until there was a full safety trials done on those, but this seems to be a better approach, just to warn everybody on the whole full schedule. This is what we know, and the truth is, if the CDC does not have safety data, then they cannot obtain informed consent. So really, this is like a gigantic experiment on children, and we won't know for like 10 or 20 years what the full measure of the consequences are. So I just want to voice my support. I hope the board will vote in favor of this. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Wendy Bent. Um, Don Eichler? Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize.
It's okay. I wasn't going to talk, but since you called my name, I will. I just also would like to ask the board. I agree that uh, I would like to see parents and everybody be given the opportunity to see what these vaccines do before they are just here, do this because I'm the doctor or whatever. So I'd appreciate seeing the board pass that.
Thank you. Don Eichler?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, when I was in high school, I graduated in 1971. We had 2 autistic kids in a school of 1,000. Now we have 1 in every classroom. My wife worked in the public school system for 14 years as an educational assistant, assisting autistic kids. And her observation was, we came from the Gresham, Portland area, lots and lots of illegal aliens there. Their kids came in, were not vaccinated, they're all healthy. And I heard last night, one of the shows I watch, that of the developed countries in the world, the United States has the highest rate of babies that die in the first 24 hours. I think it's time to stop this vaccine nonsense. It's obviously poison for anybody that's paying attention. Thank you.
Next, Renata Moon.
Hi, thank you, Chairman Fletcher, Dr. Fletcher and board. I'm Dr. Rennie Moon. I'm a practicing pediatrician. I have practiced in this region for many decades, for several decades, and I grew up here in Idaho. I have a disclaimer. My disclaimer is that my words are my own. I'm not here representing any employer, past or present, although I do represent national groups of highly alarmed physicians. We're highly alarmed at what has happened to the ethics of our country and what is happening to our nation's children. So I do represent those groups. Let's talk about informed consent for a minute. This is a foundational value of a healthy, civilized society. We have to be informed and we have to give true and willing consent. This COVID shot, I'm going to talk about that for a second because I've been doing that nationally. This shot never should have been given to our nation's children. There was no emergency for our nation's children when it came to fatalities from COVID. And we clearly have harm to our nation's children from this shot. We have evidence of heart damage. And yes, we've had fatalities. We've had fatalities. And I'm just going to bring up a couple of those fatalities, just so you know that these are real people. These were real people. These were young people, young adults as well. Victor was a 30-something-year-old. I think he was 34 years old when he died in Seattle, 16 days after the shot was administered to him. His parents didn't have informed consent when they encouraged him to get this shot to help allegedly save grandma, which we know is not true. He wouldn't have saved his grandmother. He died. He didn't have informed consent. Ernesto Jr. was 16 years old. He took this shot. His dad did not have informed consent. He didn't know. He died a week later on the basketball court. He died suddenly. A young lady I've come to know, a 23-year-old who now has a pacemaker in place. She was completely healthy when she was given the COVID shot as part of our military. She has a pacemaker in place. Please, informed consent is vital. My number one choice for this committee would be to remove these shots from the market completely. I realize you can't do that right now, or that's not up for a vote, but please, informed consent is a must. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, in the spirit of fairness, I'm seeing that the bulk of you are actually in favor of informed consent. Thank you for being here. Again, you will have a chance to speak. I'm going to make that pledge. However, if there's anyone in the audience who would like to argue against informed consent, I would ask you to speak. Janet Schertz, are you in the room? You've indicated an opposition. Janet.
Yes, I am someone who has seen firsthand the effects of non-vaccination, my mother is currently suffering from vascular dementia as an, oh, how do I call it? It's an atypical presentation of post-polio syndrome. She was on a 20-year study at the University of Washington because of this atypical. She suffered weakness in her limbs because she had polio as a child. And she had 12 children. We have all been fully vaccinated. I was the mother, am the mother of a son who was born with a very rare autoimmune disease that his immune system was not fully developed. He could not build antibodies to any vaccine given to him. He has, until he was 12 years old, had about, I don't know, either between 15 to 20 tetanus shots, because that's what the pediatric immunologist would use as to see if he was, during the treatments, if he was actually able to develop antibodies. He is now a practicing physician. And I just came back from serving 2 years in the Philippines on a medical mission, and I watched children die of measles. I watched children die of typhoid. I watched children die of pertussis, all vaccine preventable diseases. And it is heartbreaking. I also, during the heart of the COVID situation here in the United States, I worked in the COVID ICU here. Watched so many people die of a vaccine preventable disease, and it was heartbreaking. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Let's take another Tina. Well, Girardou or Girardot?
Girardou.
Oh, there you go.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity to speak on behalf of some pediatricians at Lakeside Peds who were unable to join due to the very short notice of the agenda item. I'm here to express our concern regarding some dangerous rhetoric and spreading of misinformation about vaccines. Vaccines have been a cornerstone of public health for many years, and they have consistently proven to reduce both morbidity and mortality in children and vulnerable populations. The overwhelming evidence supports that the benefits of vaccines far outweigh the risk. The risks are well documented and thoroughly communicated to every patient who receives the vaccine through the vaccine information sheet that they get. Misinformation about the vaccine can lead to fear and hesitation and ultimately endangering our public's health, which is ironic that we're, as a public health department, entertaining this conversation. It is crucial to understand and address these concerns and provide accurate, evidence-based information. As pediatricians, they are committed to educating families about the safety and efficacy of the vaccine and ensuring that their informed decisions can be made. North Idaho is currently in a pertussis outbreak. There's a measles outbreak occurring in the southern states. And with casting doubt around the efficacy and safety of vaccines, you are indeed endangering and gambling the risk of our children. In conclusion, we continue to support vaccines and would appreciate ceasing communication that is misleading and not backed by scientific evidence or would appear to be undermining research. Thank you again for your opportunity to speak.
Thank you. I'm going to entertain one more comment. Yes, ma'am. Oh. Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And when stuff like this after 4 years, this is a vaccine input
Right.
that comes and then so what are you? I'm not gonna ask. But how can you truly give informed consent when they won't tell us what's in the product? It doesn't make sense. And that's what you have to do is, you know, our church 4 years ago stood up in a cottage, what they call a cottage meeting, and said it's safe and effective. This doctor said it's safe and effective. I said, how, where's your proof? Prove me wrong. Just prove me wrong. And I'm willing to listen, but I have not found one thing that says, like the COVID vaccine is safe and effective. Newborn infants do not need hepatitis B injections. They just don't. They don't even need vitamin K. God took care of all of that. You know, so I don't know why we keep asserting unless we are getting some sort of a kickback, which I have a paper here that states from Blue Cross Blue Shield, for every 100 clients that are vaccinated with the COVID injection, they get a $40,000 kickback from the government. And that is the truth. That is a fact. And so I think we really need to step back and say, how can we give effective informed consent on every single different vaccination unless we are willing to do the research on what is in it, what it will do? Maybe it's not in the best interest of every child to give it. It might be in the best interest of some children, depending on their situations. But this is a huge red flag after 4 years. I just got this like a month ago, and I've opened it several times. So, anyhow, that's all I wanted to say. And I'm really glad that I came to this meeting. I've never come to one before, but I sit at home and I fret about it. And it's like, it's time to do something or to say something. And so, thank you.
All right. All right. Well, I'm going to take the chairman's prerogative and call an end to the public testimony at this time. Again, I promise you, after the board has deliberated, I'll open it back up, and I invite you to stay, and I'll listen to everyone in the room. But in the meantime, out of respect for the board members, I'd like to shut down public comment at this time. All right. At this juncture, I'm going to turn the meeting over to our medical director, Dr. Johnson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. What I would like to give a little bit of a larger framework as to how this idea came up, because there are so many people who are basically uninformed, and as the person who spoke representing the pediatricians so clearly demonstrated, is that there is misinformation out there. Our goal is not in any way, shape, or form to induce fear or to make the assumption that our information is going to be misinformation. A lot of the information that we wanted to present to people comes from World Health Organization, CDC, research that's been done, etc. In other words, our goal is not to have an agenda. It's to simply inform people. And I don't see how informed consent can be dangerous. If anyone in here has had an operation, even if you were in your 80s, the surgeon comes in and states, well, this could happen, that can happen, this can happen, and you could die. Now, would we assume that surgeons are anti-surgery? No, they're giving informed consent. Am I anti-vax? No. I had a family practice in where myself and another physician, we had over 8,000 patients, and I have given out thousands of vaccines to our patients over the years. But then I started seeing that maybe we weren't being told everything, such as being demonstrated here. Why is there a blank sheet of paper? That's not informed consent. So the whole idea is not to withhold vaccines, and please know that I'm very sensitive to the idea that, yes, people do die of preventable diseases. And I've been in preventive medicine for 30 years, and I'm very passionate about prevention. But we're not talking about withholding vaccines. That's a misplaced situation here. All we're talking about is informing so that the parents have, in essence, the opportunity to be informed so that they can make the decision that is best for their child. Now, what's interesting, what was brought up earlier was the vitamin K shot, and it's fascinating to me when you bring the whole idea of vitamin K. Sounds like, well, it's a vitamin, it's got to be safe, right? Well, I've got a study here it's actually from researchers who work with the World Health Organization, and I can give the reference and people can review it, etc. But they talk about that the benefit is for vitamin K deficiency bleeding is what it's trying to prevent. But it also states in there that that the amount of vitamin K, the incidence of that bleeding is 8 in 100,000 babies. And the shot basically reduces it to about 4 in 100,000. It doesn't completely eliminate it. But what that it also does is you'd think, well, how much vitamin K is being given? Well, you'd think, well, maybe they need twice the daily dose or 10 times the daily dose to prevent it. Well, the amount of vitamin K that is injected is 1,000 times the amount of vitamin K that would be given normally. So, and it says in the article, and these are World Health Organization researchers, they say at that level, it's teratogenic. It can affect physiologic development. Well, why doesn't everybody know that? Why doesn't everybody know that there are some risks and benefits? And that's all we're trying to do is prevent that. And they say at the end of the article, the accurate dose there should be research as to what the dose should be. Maybe it shouldn't be 1,000 times what the baby needs. And so I think what we have done is somehow there's been so much emotion wrapped around vaccines that sometimes we're not sitting back and taking a look at the whole notion of informed consent. That's all we're talking about is providing information to people so that they can make the best decision for their child. And how can accurate, and the key that you're bringing up is we don't want to have misinformation. We want to have accurate information. And if the pediatricians would like to contribute to the informed consent information that's provided, we welcome that. We're not withholding or trying to have any agenda, just as long as there's positives and negatives, so that a mother who's busy, who doesn't have time to sit down and do tons of research, that she can just say, hey, these are 10 benefits, these are 10 concerns, or whatever, however it ends up being, the people can say, you know what, I'm a little bit uncomfortable with that, and I'm not sure I want to do that. Let me think about it. That's all we're trying to do is provide informed consent. We're not anti or withholding, and if people say, I'm just going to sign the sheet because I want this vaccine and I'm out of here, that's their prerogative. That's what they can do. But we're not trying to induce fear. We're only simply trying to make sure that we're presenting information so that people are aware that there's positives and negatives, and please make this decision. So we welcome the comments. We're not trying to go anywhere other than is everyone here informed? And if you feel informed, great. We just wanted to make sure you were informed.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson. Any other board members would like to speak? Go ahead.
And so this is our discussion before voting.
Uh-huh. Well, I'm not even sure what we're going to vote on, to be quite honest with you. In fact, I'm going to be taking later on after I want to know where people are, to be quite honest. I don't have an agenda. It might seem like I have an agenda, but I really don't. And so at some point, I'd like to formulate a vote, a motion, and then we can even drill down and then have a formal discussion of that motion. But right now, this is a free-for-all. So I want to just hear from Glenn Bailey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the input. I am by no means a medical expert. I'm not trained other than vaccinations I need to get my horses and cattle, et cetera, okay? But I do believe strongly in informed consent. My concern there, though, is the information in informed consent. As we have heard, we are bombarded on a daily basis by credible sources on various different issues. During COVID, we had the Center for Disease Control. We had the World Health Organization all giving their inputs. And quite a few of those recommendations turned out to be somebody's best guess instead of, good information that has been studied and was provable. So that's my concern. Yes, informed consent, good thing, give it a thumbs up. My question is, what information are we going to provide? We don't have on the board, I don't think, experts in all the various things that the health district is providing for our citizens. I think it would probably be a good idea for us to form a subcommittee, if necessary, to come up with, okay, what would our reform consent look like? We've got all this, we have a number of articles that I enjoy reading. Some of them would persuade me to say, no, this isn't a good idea. And others would persuade me to believe, yeah, it is a good idea. So I would like more information before we take a vote. Informed consent, I do like informed consent. I support it. But big question mark. What information will we, as a health district, be providing? And that would be a question for our director of the health district. What is provided? I see some themes here. Is this what the health district currently provides?
Yes, what you've been given is actually what currently we provide.
Okay. And it's pretty much basic stuff. It's not a whole lot of information. So that would be my question.
If I may.
The health district's position on something, is it going to be information we do, information concerning because the health district by no means has the expertise in all the different diseases, the vaccines, and I'm looking at the finger requires vaccines now for children, for babies, kids that all necessary. So anyway, I'd like to ask input from our director.
Thanks, Glenn. I appreciate your concern, and I likewise, have concerns. But at the same time, what we have to realize is that part of the misinformation that came out during the last pandemic was because it was under emergency authorization. So, in other words, information was passed through saying, "Well, we really don't know what we're doing," but it's an emergency, but we got to do something. So let's just do it, and everybody just do it. And but see, that's not the kind of information we would be relying upon. And in other words, we don't have to be an expert in every field to be able to provide such as this. There are good studies out there that have been done on some of the positives and negatives, and just so that it may not be perfect, it may not be ideal, but I mean, I'm not sure that it's to the benefit of the public for us to do nothing. And so, if we were able to come up with something that's got some reasonable basis and get the feedback and and comments from some in the community. Again, we don't have an agenda. We're just saying, what do you have that can modify this information that we have, so that basically we can all break it down to some simple points from a mom or dad who are busy. It took them a while to come into the building, bring their kids in. They're coming in with the vaccine, so that they don't have to read 50 pages. What are 10 positives and negatives, so they can just make a decision on their own. That's kind of the goal: is informed consent in a way that's got credibility, that's got basis, but as unbiased as possible, because there are biases at every level, and as we know, there are patents that the CDC holds on vaccines, and there are patents that and monetary information or monetary remuneration that is huge, and there are very few purists in this world. And so I think what the people of North Idaho are saying, can somebody just provide me some simple information so I can make my own decision that's got some credibility? And that's the attempt. Will it be perfect? No, but I don't think we should shirk away and say, well, because I'm not a national expert, we should give them nothing. I think we should be willing to take input from several people, and let's come up with something that'll be beneficial for the parents who really want to know.
I agree with most of what you said. But public safety is liability. And the health district provides information.
What would be our liability as the health district for it? So that's another question mark I have.
Sure, we can run that by the lawyer, but any information we come out with would, I think, be equivalent. I mean, there's always going to be risks, but if we make an attempt to base it upon the best, most reliable information research that we could find, and our attempt is to protect the people of North Idaho who desire that protection. There are going to be some people who say, I don't want to read it, I'm going to sign it, I'm out of here. That's fine. But there are going to be some people who are going to say, geez, I wish I could find some information from people I trust. And I think instead of leaving, right now there's so much distrust in the medical industry and established medicine that there are millions of people who don't trust established medicine at all. And what I think we should try to do is try to reestablish some of that credibility, rather than letting some blog or somebody who knows absolutely nothing with a loud voice be the one who is directing them. So we would have a much better chance of providing good information than the average person on the internet. And I think that's kind of the goal of the help. Okay.
And Duke, I would say that I don't think you're going to find any of us up here who disagree with informed consent. But I've got to tell you, the way that this was presented felt like an agenda under the guise of informed consent. That's what it felt like. And I appreciate that it wasn't intended that way, but it sort of felt like that a bit. And I think back to our Lakeside colleagues who didn't even know that this was being talked about, didn't have enough time. And so my concern in this is not that that there should be any question about informed consent, right? Really? As a physician, there is zero question in my mind that should happen and that it should be done appropriately. Right. But again, I'm an anesthesiologist. I could tell you all about how to put somebody to sleep, but I don't know the first thing about what's in the vaccine or how that sort of stuff works, right? I couldn't counsel someone on that. And so I agree with Glenn in saying that perhaps a subcommittee looking at what we're going to put out, right? I'm not entirely sure what the vote is on. The vote is yay or nay for informed consent. I'm all in with two hands, but my concern is that we have to be very careful about the information we present and the way that it's presented.
Sure.
And I think I have a lot of respect for yours and Thomas's ability to analyze the literature. We do have training in that.
Mhm.
But we are not the subject matter experts nor the stakeholders.
Mhm.
None of us have infants. None of us have small children. We have grown children and grandchildren, I'm sure. But
Mhm.
my only concern in this is that, as Glenn said, that we are presenting factual information. The one article that was sent out, I've read numerous critiques of that, and that happens with every article, right? I get a great study in my field, and 10 minutes later, I'm like, oh, that doesn't apply, right?
Right.
So,
Right.
I think that's the nature of the beast, but I think we have to be very cognizant. I agree that we need some legal input. It seems easy to us to say, why would we need legal input if we're just providing people with information? But that is not how this world works. And so we need to keep that in mind as we move forward. And so my recommendation would be to consider a subcommittee where we look at what is the information that's currently being presented, where we invite our stakeholders with a month or 2 month notice, or anyone else who wants to come who maybe couldn't have been here today, to say, we want to talk about this. This is important to us, and it's important to our community on either side of this. And so, suffice it to say, I'm all for informed consent, but I think we need to be very cognizant about the information we're providing and how we're doing that.
And I would apologize for any information that was originally sent out that would seem as if there was an agenda. In other words, what happened was, when we first started looking at information, the whole idea was, how many people know this? Hardly anybody does. Well, how many people know this? Then all of a sudden, when you've only heard one side of an issue, and then you go, wow, there's a lot of information that a lot of people haven't heard, then it was like no use replicating what we've all heard. It was kind of like, maybe we should put this in as a balance, and maybe people would like to know this and like to know this and like to know this. So I could see where it would come across as if it was biased, because we were just finding stuff like, well, I never knew that this hadn't been studied, research hadn't, double-blind studies hadn't been done on this. I mean, it was like, in essence, new knowledge to us as well, going down that line. So I could see where it would come across as a bias, but that wasn't the intention of saying, okay, let's take all of this information in the subcommittee. I'm not opposed to that at all. As I mentioned in the email, if the pediatricians want to be a part of the subcommittee and enter that information in, more than happy to put together what everybody does. But as long as they also see that there are concerns, in other words, there is going to be a little bit of a bias on their side, and that's understandable. I have a bias in what I practice. You have a bias in what we practice. We all have a bias in what we do. We all like what we do. so that, and that's not a negative. It's just saying, let's see the higher goal beyond ourselves to benefit and provide some sanity to our society, which has been so emotional about this topic, where if you bring it up, you're an anti-vaxxer. That's like ridiculous. No, it's like, no, our desire is to provide information so mom and dad can make the decisions that are best for their family. That's the bottom line. So however that pans out, I'm open to it.
Mr. Trinity?
So this is my first board meeting, so I guess it's
Welcome.
Baptism. So what I would like to say is, I do have 35 years or more experience as a public health professional. And I did work for Panhandle Health, and I worked about half the time as a nurse in a very rural area. And then I worked the other half of my career as a nurse practitioner. And I have been involved in immunizations throughout that time. As well as doing immunizations, I also worked in epidemiology. And so can kind of tell the backstory because, so many years, gray hair. So in the old days, yes, we opened the refrigerator and there were like 3 vaccines. There was DPT, there was polio, and there was MMR. And while we only had a few vaccines, at the same time, when I was doing disease investigations, one of the hardest things I ever had to do is when I had to call a family who had a child die from a meningococcal infection that had affected their brain. And, this is a long time ago, so I I'm pretty sure it was Haemophilus. And every year, it wasn't a death, but young children, babies who were severely impacted to the point of being blind, to the point of having feeding tubes, to the point of having to be institutionalized for 33 years of their life. And when the Haemophilus vaccine came out, and I want to say it was around the 1990s, and it came out to the two-year-old population. We weren't doing it for younger kids. But the minute that vaccine came out, I didn't have to keep doing those reports because it was so successful. Now, I also was the nurse that when a parent came in and said, they came in for the first time for immunizations, and those forms, they spelled out exactly what the risk and benefit were. And I was the nurse, I was the bad girl that said, no, this is the first time you're here. I want you to take the time to read these forms so then you and I can have a conversation to answer your questions. So I'll probably, end my spiel there about my public health experience. But I guess as a new board member, I have some questions, some process questions, and I don't know if this is the venue for me to ask those.
Of course.
Okay.
What other venue is there?
So, well, first of all, I will say with most of the information I read, it did seem pretty slanted toward the risk. I didn't see a whole lot of benefit. And I'm kind of wondering, number one, where did this information come from? Why is it being presented now? What's behind this? Was there a patient concern? Was there a staff concern? Where is the resource or organization that created the frequently asked questions? Have we gotten information regarding morbidity and mortality of unvaccinated versus vaccinated by disease categories? Have we talked to our epidemiology staff? Have we talked to our local pediatricians or infectious disease doctors? So, I'm trying to figure out, a couple things. One, of course, you can tell I'm a proponent for vaccination from my history and what I experienced it. But I'm trying to understand the framework for how we assess problems and how that's a collective board process. So those are my questions. And I know there's a lot there. Yeah.
Great question.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to address?
Yeah, partially. I'm not sure I remember all of the questions, but see, what's really interesting as far as if you look into some of the research on what are the risks and the effects of vaccinated versus unvaccinated, what you'll find is a lot of the research is vaccinated versus vaccinated later. A lot of research on what are the effects in this region among those who've truly been vaccinated and those who haven't. And so it's not readily available. It's kind of the point. And so what we would have to do is be more than happy to be able to investigate that. And as mentioned earlier, would we want to incorporate any epidemiologists, anyone who is a pediatrician who's frequently giving vaccinations? Absolutely. I mean, the source of that information came originally because, let me get back to the original. The original was in a tour of downstairs, in the clinic. When parents come in, there's a form that gives information that's been presented from the CDC that basically says this is what the shot is all about. But there's some information that doesn't give a big picture of everything that's risk-benefit ratio. It's not really necessarily a complete informed consent because there's some biases on that end. And so then therefore it's like, okay, well, maybe we can come up with a form that would be a little bit more balanced, and that's where the idea came. And so we started doing looking at some issues, and so this was just a sample of frequently asked questions to just bring up the topic. I mean, in other words, this isn't been formulated. We haven't gone down a long pathway. It was just, as you can see, there's a lot of emotion just bringing up this topic. But we didn't want to run away from it and say, okay, let's leave the people of North Idaho completely uninformed, and let's let all decisions be made from Atlanta. That just didn't make sense either, because there's different infections that occur in different parts of the country and different risk, issues involved. So let's just open up this door, provide something that's informed consent, and see how we can benefit people this way.
So I guess, and again, I'm retired, so I don't know if the process has changed, but when people did present to the health department, there's the general form that has all the questions about health history, but also, depending on the immunizations that they were due to receive that day, we have individual consent forms for each vaccination, which very much outline the risk and benefit.
Mm-hmm.
So did that change?
Well, that's where when you review the source of that information, is what I'm saying is that yes, there is an informational packet, but it's not. It's not. It must have changed because it's not as complete as it perhaps once was.
Do we have staff here to address that?
Do we have what?
Staff here that could address that.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, our division administrator for clinical services, she is out on the family emergency. She got a day or two ago, so unfortunately she's not.
So these are questions we're more than happy to look into. In other words, this didn't appear as adequate informed consent. That's what I'll say.
Mr. Chairman, if I may add to the discussion, just this morning I received a number of quite a bit of several correspondence from several local pediatricians and other stakeholders, and in the spirit of robust conversation on this topic, they felt that informed consent on the agenda, which I was certainly part of making the agenda, did not adequately describe what the discussion was going to entail today, and so I would certainly recommend that if the board is looking for discussion on this item, that those individuals should be party to it as well.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
And Mr. Chairman, I would agree with that. And I would also say that we did listen to a lot of public comment that was very much sort of pro what this concept was, but we only heard of two that were against. And I'm sure there are more people that have other, I hate the word against, because that's not what it is, right? It's a differing viewpoint. And so I'm very excited to hear some, other people who may have differing views on that as well. I think that's important.
Well, Tim, here, we've got another board member. Commissioner Bradlin, would you like to make any comments?
I have no problem with the consent part of it. It's how that is all going to be put together. So, and how that is going to come together. I think that there's going to be stuff coming down from SHS from the government that's regarding this. I also think that we should probably pump the brakes on this and put a committee together on it. And that's my 2 cents worth on it.
Any other board members would like to speak?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I appreciate all the comments. My recommendation would be that we determine that we should table the issue when the objective informed subcommittee to define what we need on consent. Maybe we'll be determining what agencies we approve of to provide the information that we would then provide to our patients have provided them with informed consent. In other words, we need to define what is informed consent. What are the agencies that we find in consent? Or what studies? What consent? Because there's all kinds of sources.
So I have deliberately not said anything up to this point because I wanted to really hear from all the other board members. I've given this topic a great deal of thought. And in no particular order, these are my thoughts. Amazingly, the topic of vaccinations, the childhood vaccine schedule, is enormously emotional. You would think we were talking about abortion or something. I mean, really and truly, there's this huge emotional divide, and people are heartfelt. I'm not saying one side or the other, or right or wrong, but there's certainly a lot of emotion. That strikes me as remarkable, and we must acknowledge that. My next thought, we will never decide, the seven of us, or even if we put a subcommittee together, we will never make sense of this topic. My goodness, we just witnessed 2 weeks of Senate confirmation hearings with Robert Kennedy Jr. And we had experts on this side, and we had experts on this side, and for 2 weeks they warred over this, and the vote was still 48-52. I submit to you, we will never come to an agreement. And why will we not come to an agreement? This is my third thought. Because we can't come to an agreement. The data is not there. We can't say whether the childhood vaccination schedule in the aggregate is good for the children of America, or we can't say it isn't. Unless you say, oh, but Thomas, this is just your third thought. What makes you the expert to make that thought? Well, included in your package is, in fact, a statement from the NIH that admits openly in item 3, page 2, that there is not enough information to say whether the childhood vaccine schedule is beneficial or not. And why is that? Because you have to understand, information as it comes to medicine is not all the same. Not all data is equal, is what I'm saying. Not all data is equal. So you can have someone who has a personal experience. Well, that's one data point, and that's one personal experience. Well, then if you have a room full of people with the same personal experience, well, now that would be a series. Okay? Now, the next tier up would be, well, now you take a whole county, or you even take a whole state, and you catalog an experience of that whole state. But when you do that, it's all kind of in arrears. You're going to observe what occurred, vaccinated, unvaccinated, this schedule, that schedule. And the best you can do is say, well, in that particular frame of time, under those clinical parameters, this is what we saw. But that data is only so good. Now, in the case of medicine, not astrophysics or particle physics or organic chemistry, I don't know about those things, but in the case of clinical medicine, the crown jewel of information is what we call a randomized controlled trial. That's the best you're ever going to get. And by the way, not all randomized controlled trials are equal. In fact, they can be flawed. They can have lots of shall we say, inadequacies in the way the trial was structured. So sadly, even with the best data available, you may still not know truth, as in capital T, truth. Now that's just a sad reality. a very sad reality. So we're dealing with something that is highly emotional. We have, that's just a fact. We have real life decisions to make, and yet we're making these decisions on not that much information. And I would submit to you, were we to set up a subcommittee, we'd have 3 or 4 subcommittees. And you know what? They're not going to determine anything. We just witnessed it. It's not going to happen. I mean, I'll be happy to set up a subcommittee, but it's going to be a waste of time. Total, complete waste of time. So I'm going to propose a motion ultimately, but a compromise. Here's my compromise. Okay? We're at a binary. Do we do nothing, or do we do something? That's the binary. If we do nothing, well, then we have acquiesced to whatever the status quo is. We're not going to do anything. I mean, doing nothing is just that. We're not going to do anything. If we do something, what is the minimum we can do such that people who feel emotional about informed consent can say, okay, at least something was done, but at the same time address the issues that many board members have made, and that is, well, what in the world can you say that is fair-minded, balanced, the truth, unequivocally the truth, and yet it satisfies to some measure the criteria of informed consent. And so here is what I would propose. And actually, ma'am, I don't know if you knew it, but you just about hit it on the nose. So as it turns out, if you were to take the childhood vaccine schedule, that's it. That's the childhood vaccine schedule. And you were to do nothing more than to tell the patients how long did the clinical trial last. It went into the creation of the database that allowed the CDC and the FDA to say, oh yeah, safe and effective. Just that one fact. How long was the clinical trial? That's it. So let's just take the very first one, which happens to be the first vaccine that American human babies get on day 1, the hepatitis B vaccine. Well, as it turns out, this is from the package insert. This is the piece of paper from the vaccine insert. That trial lasted 5 days. Now, what I would submit, again, we have a binary. Do we say something or do we say nothing? Okay? If we say nothing and we walk away, we can say, well, we said nothing. But if you're going to say something, and we want to make sure that the something is at least the truth, and for those who say, but how do we know? Well, how do we know? Well, we don't know. I've already given you an explanation as to the reason we don't know, and the reason we will not know is because we don't have the data, and we will never know. I don't know about never, but certainly in the timeline of this meeting and in the timeline of our lives, because you have to understand, this program is 50, 60 years in the making. We're not going to sort through all of it. Through 60 years of effort. So if all you did in terms of informed consent was just simply tell the patient, by the way, the clinical trials for this vaccine were 60 days. Now, we talk about somebody, I believe, Peggy, you asked. So I asked Eric to give us an example, the MMR. Here's your MMR. Here it is. It's in your package. You will not see, this is what the patients are given when they come to Panhandle Health. Here it is, right there. Doesn't say anywhere in there how long the clinical trials were. That's not in there. I would submit to you as a compromise position, again, we either do nothing. We're at a binary. Kick it down the road, set up a subcommittee, or we do something today. And I'm proposing that the something is if you're going to get an MMR, you just simply say, well, this is how long, ma'am, your child is for an MMR. This is how long the clinical trial lasted. Now, I can imagine that the mom is going to go, well, is that enough? Time out. We're not going to answer that question. I don't know. I don't know if that's enough, if 60 days is enough or not. But just to let you know, this is how long the clinical trial was. I've said my piece. Any other board members want to speak?
I just feel, I just got this information because the board packet didn't come out until Tuesday evening. And I wasn't aware there was going to be a whole public testimony component because I could have found other people that probably would have come and given their viewpoints. So for me personally, I don't think the information has been vetted completely.
You know, what I, in light of all of that, what I would like to make a motion. We'll see how that. Well,
there is no motion.
Yeah, right. And I'd like to make a motion that we put this item on our agenda for our next meeting, but in the interim, allow, and I'm not exactly sure how to word this, but I mean, you know, in other words, allow those who are interested in contributing information to this topic present or offer their assistance to be on a committee, and we make a decision as to what the next step would be at that meeting. And that's my motion. And the reason for saying that is because I don't, you know, I'm with you that somehow informed consent is just fundamental to medicine. And I don't think we should run away and say, oh, this is a tough topic, let's just run and hide. I don't think that serves the people. But at the same time, I don't think we should be scared of emotion. I think we should be at the same time willing to say, and I don't think we should necessarily run to agencies because agencies have got all kinds of money involved there, and I'm not going to rely upon agencies. It's like we've been chosen to be a board here, and I think that we can come up with something that would provide some sense of value to the person who wants some information that can be agreeable to both sides of the issue. And again, I'm not anti-vax. I'm just pro-informed consent, and I don't think that information like Tom presented, it has been out there in the public realm enough where people can say, wow, is 2 weeks long enough of a clinical trial to make a decision? I don't know that I would feel comfortable in knowing that, and I think that we need to at least and hear from both sides. I mean, and have information on both sides so that we can move forward carefully, so everyone's in agreement as much as possible. There's always going to be, like you said, it'll be 51-49, but at least with an attempt to provide informed consent, because the average mom and dad are very confused. And I think it's safest for them to run away, which I'm not sure is a wise conclusion. See, so I mean, in other words, I'm not advocating running away. I'm not advocating yes to everything. Let's just provide some information to try to help.
Mr. Chairman, if I can add, I don't believe we need a motion on that. If it's the will of the board to put this on the upcoming agenda, we certainly can, and I can work with the board on speakers if they would wish to participate.
Eric, I mean, this isn't a 1 hour ordeal, and this is not something, I mean, this is something that should be a public announcement and not a Facebook post that gets reshared and then nobody knows, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that was part of the frustration with this, was that no one knew. And by the time they knew, it was an hour ahead. And, you know, many of our pediatric practitioners are clearing their schedule and trying to, you know, be part of the conversation because they really do want to be part of the conversation, and they do care deeply about the children in this community. And so we have got to hear from them, and it's going to be longer than an hour, I think, is part of the other issue. It may need to be, you know, a totally separate kind of thing so that people feel heard and so that we get accurate information from both sides of this.
Do a town hall. Do you have a proposal? Go ahead.
I mean, I think the town hall, I think that's probably a better venue. It has to be bigger than this. There were people standing downstairs. You couldn't hear the first part, you know. And so I wasn't here during the COVID hysteria, but we saw something very similar. We do need a bigger room. We do need significant advance notice, and maybe even a time that doesn't involve, you know, the busiest time of the afternoon for our pediatric colleagues. You know, but I think a town hall would probably be a reasonable thing. Right?
Do you have a time in mind?
No, I don't have a time in mind. I can clear my schedule.
Saturday, would that work for you?
Ooh, that can work.
And Mr. Chairman, I can reach out to all of the board members to find a suitable time for everyone to be attending.
But I think the basic premise is we just need advance notice, and we want to make sure everyone's aware that we're having these important conversations. I agree with you. These are very important conversations. I mean, the level of vaccine hesitancy in our country, and probably rightfully so when you see what we've been through in the last 5 years. I'm certainly not negating this. None of my pediatric colleagues would negate this either. You know, and I don't know any pediatric colleagues that sit there and say, you must get vaccinated, and I'm not telling you the informed consent, and I have no questions about this process, right? So there is real emotion, and rightfully so, and we need to acknowledge that in our community. And if we're going to take this on, then we need to do it in the right and appropriate manner.
What is it thinking? What was being like before? You know,
I guess the working parents on Saturday.
And CDC does not have any credibility. They recognize the force, and there was a lot of discussion, and it wasn't publicized. It was all thrown under the rug. And Fauci, all those lies, and everything about that. What we got when we looked at was on one hand. Now, why am I not dead? Because I didn't have the other 70 that they're putting our children. There is no excuse for COVID because everything's got a conservative in it, and that's what makes it not just freaking off, you know, off the walls and all that stuff that goes on your brain. It's metal. It's not there. I know it's not public comment, but we should have some things to say.
Go ahead.
My biggest
I think my biggest concern, I'm sorry, do I need to say my name? Okay, I'm Gina Padilla. I'm a nurse practitioner in pediatrics. And my biggest concern with all of this is my first thought is I don't know who everyone is seeing, but I've never given a vaccine without giving full informed consent. And so it's almost offensive when you hear, if you're not for those of you opposed to informed consent, do you have anything to say? And that's not true. And I had to check on that form that I was opposed to informed consent. And so the way it was written in general is relatively offensive, which is what I think heated a bunch of people up. One of the many things. And yes, it's emotional. And yes, everyone is trying to do the best thing that they can for their child. There are a lot of decisions. People are going to disagree. We do what we have with the information we have at the time. I'm not going to stand up here, I don't think, and negate some of the things that you said, even though I have pretty concrete things to negate it, but just in interest of time. But I do want to say that I think not giving the pediatric providers specifically, because we are the people who are giving them. If you're an anesthesiologist, she's never given a vaccine in her life, probably. I mean, family med, maybe, I don't know what you did, but I don't know if you've given a vaccine in your life, and I don't know how much extra things people have done to learn about the vaccines and all of the things that are in that. And we're not denying that there's no risk, and never in my career have I denied that. But I think not including people who do this and do this in the interest of helping children is not a kind of a fair thing. And so I think that was our thing. Do you have?
I also work in pediatrics. I've worked as an NP for about 2 decades, and I'm completely pro consent. That's not a question. I think the most important piece is that this informed consent form, it sounds much easier to produce that than it will be to have to come out with a product that is well, as Dr. Johnson said, as unbiased as possible. I will be in India in a couple of weeks. I'll be around polio. This will be my 9th trip to a country like India. I've seen firsthand the value of vaccines. I don't even think that's a debate. Now, can we talk about schedules? Can we talk about how many vaccines we give? Could we talk about some of our European colleagues in Scandinavian countries and their schedules maybe looking quite different? I think that those are the things we should be debating. I think, and these are the conversations you guys, we are in these conversations every day trying to help parents make the best decisions they can make. We have plenty of families who don't vaccinate. We have families who do vaccinate. We take care of them equally and provide excellent care to them. We partner with them, and I'm speaking not representing my clinic or the organization I work for, but there are often times where folks will say, we only want to do a few. Which ones do you think are the ones that my child needs? We build those bridges. We talk about the risks. We talk about the benefits. And sometimes parents walk away because the relationship was built out of trust. They feel better and they step into this scary space, which is very scary. If I was a layperson, I would feel the same way that many of you in this room feel. I would be confused. But after 2 decades and coming out of a winter where I've seen more vaccine preventable disease this winter, seeing little babies that have to be on oxygen to live, I'm a supporter of most of our main common vaccines. I'm not talking about COVID. We're not talking about that. I mean, I agree with Dr. Moon. That is not in my repertoire, and it won't be, because the data doesn't support it being efficacious or good and safe for kids. But it's been interesting. This is my first time in a meeting like this. I appreciate the work that this body has before them. It's not an easy task, but I agree we have to find some common ground. It isn't enough to say, Giant Pharma is this, and Giant Pharma is saving my kids with leukemia right now. There are medicines that allow them to live. Where when I was a child, 90% of a kid with ALL would die. Today, it's about 80 to 90% will live. That's pharma. Pharma is also putting out a vaccine called COVID, which I think is completely messed up. So it adds to the confusion, right? But I think it's not an all or nothing. You kind of pick and choose, and you have to find some common ground. So thank you.
Any other comments from the public? Go ahead.
Diana Sheridan. I appreciate your comment about we really don't have the data. We don't have the information that we really need to do like full informed consent. And even, when we're talking about, here's a trial and it lasted X number of days, is that enough? I don't know how many of those trials have actually, we've retro inspected for the veracity of the actual initial trials. I have a bachelor's of science from the University of Washington School of Medicine, and my favorite class that I ever took in college was how to lie with statistics. And it gave us the ability to be able to look at a study and know if it was a pile of crap or not. That's number one. In other words, where are we getting our information? And just because there was a trial, what was the quality of that trial? Unless somebody's gone back and looked at it, we really don't know. And the other thing we do not know is nobody has taken and accumulated, nobody has studied if we give this kid 1 shot, 5 shots, 10 shots, we give them this entire regimen. What is the accumulative of the adjuvants? What is the cumulative of active ingredients? We don't have any of that data. So that's all.
I just wanted to say that if you guys did decide to do a town hall at the Altar Church, would let you use the building for free. It holds about 400 people, no matter where people's stances are, as long as it doesn't conflict with any of our schedule.
Will you also cater? Any other questions? Commissioner Corn.
So my name's Ron Korn. About 4 or 5 months ago in November, 20,000 Bonner County citizens elected me to be their representative in government as their commissioner. They did so, and one fact, because one of my main things on my platform was medical freedoms. And this is one thing that I am running on. My main platform is freedom in general. And I'm very concerned at the medical industry. People, I'm going to say the super majority of the citizens of this country no longer trust, thank you, their government, number one. They no longer trust the medical establishment just equally probably with their government. It was one reason that I decided to run, so that I could help build bridges, because I want to live and die in Bonner County. It's paradise. My 3 children were born at home in Bonner County, and they don't want to leave. I feel that I have to do something in order to make their lives better, hopefully, in the future. And that's what I'm asking you guys as a board, on behalf of the 20,000 people that voted me in, to consider doing this. You guys have facts, it sounds like, that are being withheld from the public. Simple facts such as 5 days that the study took place on this one vaccine. Okay, it might be on there, it's not highlighted, but it should be well known that this study was 5 days. This study was 13 days. And if that is good enough for the parents, then that's fine. But the information should be available. I believe Panhandle Health District is giving them information on vaccines from the CDC. Are they not?
That's where it comes from.
Are those factual? I got to say they're not 100% factual. So when we're talking about putting a committee together to figure out on the other side of the coin, we want to make sure that 100% of the facts on the consent side should be, then I challenge you that 100% of the facts for vaccinations should also be the same. It should be created equally. When it comes to liability issues, I have a problem with that. I have made decisions in the last 4 or 5 months that I've been representing the people of Bonner County that created a liability for the county, but it was the right thing to do. Sometimes you have to put aside the liability issues to a certain point, saying, yes, this may create a liability for Panhandle Health District or the state, but it is the right thing to do for the people, and we will take those repercussions if they ever come. One of the things that I voted on was to put a baby box in our EMS station, and I had some pushback on that because it creates a liability for the county. What if a baby was put in there dead and it was blamed on the county's decision to put this baby box into this EMS station? I'm willing to accept that liability, because on the other side of the coin, what if that mother left that newborn baby on the side of the corner, the street corner, and it froze to death? I'm willing to accept that liability on the county's end to try and protect that baby versus not giving it protection. So there's a lot of ways, there's always 2 sides to the coin that we can look at. I would just ask that the board would make the right decision as far as representing the people, which you do, giving us a voice, which I hope that you do, and allow us some information so that we can make a better informed decision. There was a lady here earlier that was talking about making sure the moms were here. I got to say, we need to make sure that both parents are here, because in my family, it was me that actually did the homework on vaccines and other things for our kids. And then mom and dad were able to come to a better decision. So I would ask that we open it up, obviously, to both moms and dads. I could say a lot more, but in the interest of time, I would love to be coming back to the next meeting if this is on the agenda. If you guys do decide to put a committee or subcommittee together, I'd be more than happy to throw my hat in the ring on that. Whatever I can do as a citizen and as a government official, I would be more than happy to help. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Julie. I did not plan on speaking today, but there's so many things I could say. I'm going to keep it really quick. One of the things that I didn't hear brought up was that so many side effects, things that happen after babies are vaccinated, do not get reported to VAERS. We all know that. I personally have witnessed it with people getting COVID vaccines, and you're told, oh, it just means it's working better the more side effects you have. I have heard that repeatedly. That is repeated back to people. So when you have an injury, you're told it's just working better. So if you have a side effect from any of the vaccines, you go back to your doctor. Are they reporting it? I can tell you they're not. Not all of them. Some of them maybe, but it's up to the parents to do it. And many parents do not know about the VAERS system. It's just they have no knowledge of it. So there's a lot more injuries that we don't know about, and we need to be honest. I think we all have questions about the schedule. You go in at 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, because you get the people in and you give them as many shots as you can, because they're not going to come back. It's convenience. It's to get them. It's not in the interest of their health. It's a convenience. The insurance pays. Get them in there. Get those shots in. It's disgusting. Thankfully, I have a 21-year-old, and I knew back then not to give her the hepatitis B vaccine, that it was only tested for 5 days. I knew that when you said that. I knew that. I don't have hepatitis B. My husband does not have hepatitis B, and my baby is not having sex with a prostitute or shooting up IV drugs. I had no concerns about her getting hepatitis B. If that's something we need to do later, then that's what we'll decide. But on day one, our babies should not be getting a vaccine like hepatitis B unless they're in danger of getting hepatitis B. Most of our children are not. So we just need to be honest about why they're getting, what they're getting, when they're getting it. You can't solve all the problems here. We realize that. But I think being honest with parents and saying the truth about, we know maybe this is not the best, or you could wait on this. Let's have an honest conversation. I mean, it's obvious now. There's a reason RFK Jr. is in his position. The parents spoke out. That is why. So we'd appreciate some support from you guys. And I appreciate all of your jobs. The time it took to get to where you are, your medical school training, everything. We appreciate it. We know you went in with good intentions, and we're asking you to remember that for all of it's our whole country's health. We need healthy children. So anyway, thank you.
Back there. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
So if this does end up going to a subcommittee, one thing that I would assert and almost demand as much as possible is transparency within the subcommittee to make sure that it isn't being overran by one point of view or the other. We live in a difficult time where the trust in public institutions, especially health institutions, is at an all-time low. And maybe this might serve as a small step towards restoring some of that confidence. However, it's one of those things where it doesn't help when you have people over here saying that they can completely negate the viewpoint of someone else concretely. Like she was offended, and then in turn she offends and disregards someone else's point of view. In the beginning of the pandemic, about 2 months into it, I started losing family members like clockwork. I had 12 family members pass away in 2 years. 2 of them, and I can't prove it, but my grandpa, 3 months to the day when he received the COVID vaccine, died. Same thing with my grandma. It was almost exactly 3 months later, she died. Whenever we have this moral and ethical obligation, especially, I don't need to lecture you individuals on your moral and ethical obligations. Wherever there's risk, there has to be information and choice. And this attitude that moving forward with only the pediatricians as they have a right to be here. Well, guess what? Anybody that is I'm here at very short notice because I care. Okay. Was it convenient for me to be here? No. But when it comes to me, when it comes to my children as a dad, I'm the ultimate authority and I have the right to know. I have a God-given right. I hope that you guys don't kick this down the can down the road for too long and wait for someone else to get injured because they weren't given the proper information. God did not give us a spirit of fear, but he gave us a spirit of courage. Do the right thing. Please, I implore you.
Yeah, hold on. That's great. Because we need to pay attention to the lives of the rest of the board members. Do I hear a motion? Anyone? Peggy? Go ahead.
I would agree that we bring this topic up again.
Board meeting or town hall? Or both?
Board meeting for this one, right?
Well, I don't know. Here's a okay. So I guess the binary I'm hearing is do nothing or do something. What I'm hearing most people say is the something is we're going to kick the can down the road. So now, what flavor of kicking down the road are we looking at? I've heard different options. One option, just bring it up at the next board meeting. And in the interim, maybe not have a subcommittee. Option 2 is a town hall where we can have many more people come. There'll be other groups who can come. I mean, we can just make it a bigger venue, better marketing so that we get a bigger crowd. That would be another option. And then there's subtypes of both of those. That is to say, do we do this in 1 month, 2 weeks, 2 months? Well, I don't know. You see where I'm going. I mean,
well, my motion would be to create something and to have that subcommittee report at every board meeting. What it is, where you got, what the next step is. Until there is consensus that there is an actionable item to be
okay, that's reasonable.
I think that might be a little too.
Oh, it's huge on that.
I would hate for us to say, oh, we're in a hurry.
Right, no, and I agree with that. By the way, Peggy, you asked a very good question early on when you spoke. You said, where is this coming from? Here's where it's coming from. It's the zeitgeist of this moment in America. Maybe the whole world. Everyone is talking about this. You can feel the passion. You can feel the emotion. This is not just coming from nowhere. This is, a lot of people are concerned about this. That's the zeitgeist.
I understand that, but I still have questions and am confused about the whole process. That, I understand this is the moment, but, I got information on Tuesday. I don't know when, I'm just trying to understand the process as a new board member.
Then I have a proposal for you. Be on the subcommittee.
Yeah, I would love to do that.
Okay, you're on. Okay, we've got two. Anyone else want to be on the subcommittee? Dr. Penna. I tell you what. Email that man right there. Eric Cantor. Tell him that you're willing to be. Now, do we want to have a maximum number of people on the subcommittee? This is only for board members to answer. Yeah, I agree. It has to be. What, 6? I know. So what is it? 6, 10, 8, 3?
You probably want an odd number. You want an
Odd number.
Yeah,
Eric has a thought?
Well, one of the things that I just want to bring up is that certainly that seems to be the direction that this discussion is heading. But, in the name of the bylaws and how we set up the subcommittees and members and so forth, before we get too far ahead of ourselves, I think we should take a look at, to Peggy's point, because this is not something that I've experienced in 20 years of health history. So I want to make sure if we set this up, let's set it up right. I can certainly have information to the board within a matter of days, and then we can move forward from there.
And that's fair enough. In the meantime, those of you who are here and have expressed an interest, submit your name to Eric Katner, and that would include board members as well. And then we will confer with one another as to what structure it should take so that it's all laundered, it's hygienic. Yes,
So,
ma'am?
and I don't know where everyone's from. I do appreciate all the information that everybody's brought forward. I think it's important that we all dialogue and, remembering that we're all concerned about the health, public health for people in North Idaho. But I also feel like, I don't know if people are mainly from Kootenai or what counties they're from, but I think we need to include members from all counties so there's good representation.
Amen. I wholeheartedly agree. And they should represent individuals from different elements of the community. So not only all 5 counties, but representing not only people in medicine, but people not in medicine. I'd like to hear from accountants, farmers, and what, sure, of course.
And hearing from them doesn't necessarily mean to have the conversation, right? Something you can say, "Well, you have to hear from them."
Let me get a feel, though, from the remaining board members here. Roughly how many do you think we should have on the subcommittee? 7.
Yeah, that's what I would say.
I second that.
I just-
I think the only voting
Interesting. No, I got it. What do you guys think? That's an interesting point. I'm not saying no. I just want to be inclusive.
We want to have diverse board members, then we don't want to have just all medical people.
No, I got it. But Glenn here is not a medicine guy. He's a farmer. I don't know. What do you do for a living?
Well, then with the subcommittee, you can vote on anything.
Oh, I'm not sure they would. Well, that's a good point.
Typically, the subcommittees in the past that we've had for these things have brought to the board, they're sort of assessing.
Finding.
The vote, the board ends up with it.
Yes,
And
I
believe
think,
that's what the bylaws do.
and I like what you just said. I think actually it doesn't matter whether they vote or not. What the subcommittee is going to do is make a recommendation. That's actually, in fact, you guys and the county commissioners have workshops.
Boards, almost every department, and their advisory boards.
Right.
They get together, they discuss, and it really does save you guys time to do the research and stuff like that, and then bring up the clean.
Yes, there you go. So that obviates the need for whether they vote or not. They're not going to vote. They're just going to sort of come to some consensus.
Giving it a thumbs up.
Well, right. Anyone else? Some of these folks, I know Dr. Jameson has it like. Do you need to? Oh, thank you for coming, by the way. Thank you. We appreciate it, really and truly. Why don't I take a motion to adjourn? Well, so moved. The second?
taken care of all the business stuff?
Yes, we have. I rigged it that way.
All right, let me second.
Okay, all in favor? Aye. Any objections? Tim, you want to stay on?
Did we table
Okay.
the original
The,
item?
the meeting is adjourned. However, anyone who has something to say, I'm here. Please speak up. This is your moment to, and vote.
I've got your contact information.
Or if you need to go, I know you have.
Get cards and then that way I can file with them.